Hey, welcome back to the Secret Underground Lair. Working on our modern console table. Today is a day of rough assembly. So we have, yesterday was able to get this support piece between the two legs. So we put a tenon on this side to go into the mortise on the leg. This morning I just finished off the tenon on this end, fitted in here, made sure I had the right fit. So we're 14 inches from this side to this side. And we're ready now to make 3 more tenons of this sort. We'll make some long tenons, or some long support beams with tenons to go from this leg to the other leg. So that's today's adventure. Rough assembly of the modern console table. So this little support piece that we have with a 10 on each end is 9 inches from a face width and 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch on each tenon. So the overall length is going to be 10 3/4 inches. So I've set up the fence here to be 10 3/4 inches from the blade, and I'm just going to cut 3 blanks off here, making sure I get some good clean wood. That's going to be close. You can probably get 2 off there and 1 off this piece. So I may take the second one, may get 2 off this because it looks like there's some good clean wood in here. So trying to avoid any knots if I can. So I'll set the camera up and we'll make those initial cuts, and then we'll go make the tenons. Next, I want to make sure that the shoulder is touching the blade and touching the fence. And making sure that the piece is square against the blade. The trick, of course, is now making sure that I am consistent with what face do I want presented on the top. And what I'm going to do is, the joint is going to be on the top face. What I want is the this piece to be exposed as, vertically. That becomes a vertical face. This is where it has been joined is the horizontal face. So I'll go through this way. I'm just going to do one at a time, but that's how it'll be done. So probably put you on fast forward through this. A little bit of tedious, it's just kind of back and forth with every one, but you'll see how this process goes. Now I want to set the vertical height, which is about half of that. And this may require a little bit of fine tuning on each cut. The width is going to be the same because that's, this dimension I have no trouble with because that's set by the hollow chisel, the square chisel on the mortise jig. However, the dimension this way is dependent on how far I move the piece within the jig. So this dimension is subject to my whims and fancy. This is subject to the machining of the tool. So we may have to do a little bit of adjustment on this cut that I'm making now on a piece-by-piece basis. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right, there's our pieces ready now to do a dry fit assembly of the legs. See how that works. So I have just loose, this tenon of course was one that we tested earlier, so it fits in snugly. I just put this in a little bit loosely. When I say loosely, it is a snug fit, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And I'm just going to tap that together. I like the fit there. Like the fit there. That's going to work well. Of course, we'll check everything for square before it's glued and clamped, but we'll do a test fit on the other piece now. It's one of the things I have to do to make sure this is going to fit well. Just get rid of the sawdust and swarf that's left over from the creation of this mortise. The chisel, of course, leaves it a little bit rough in there. It's okay. I think there's more, provides better gluing opportunity, but it does leave a lot of the dust in there, and of course that would prevent the tenon from sitting properly in the joint. Okay, that's done. Let's see if we get these guys fitting well. That looks good. This one. Yes, he'll go. Very snug, but it's going to work. Nice, snug fit all around. Yes, indeed. Pleased with that. Okay, now we're going to make the long pieces that go from here over to the other leg. So those are going to be 50 inches plus another 1.5, so 51.5 inches. And we have 4 of those to do. And before I go too far on this, I'm going to make another, I should have done this earlier when I cut the first tenons. I'm just going to make a sample tenon that I can use to set the blade height when I go to make the tenons on these new long pieces. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. The other trick that I'm going to use for these tenons as they're going in, which I didn't do on these ones, so I probably should have, is just give a slight taper on the edge of that tenon. And that will prevent it from grabbing any material on the inside of the mortise joint. So it'll go in a little better. Okay, that's our sample tenon. What we'll do now is cut our long support pieces to length. We'll start by getting a straight edge on each end. Clamp these guys together and make one cut. So it turns out I'm a 1/16 of an inch short on one of these pieces, but that's going to be inside a tenon, not worried about it. It's just, oh, so close. I just realized I'm not off by 16. That should be 51.5, not 51 3/4. So I really should take another 1/16 of an inch off that. And now where this is becoming a little more interesting is the extent to which the tenon fits into the mortise. I do want to have a little clearance at the bottom of the mortise, so if it's too tight, we'd have a gap there. I'm going to take another 1/8 of an inch off here to get us to 51.5. That's actually a very difficult cut to do because it's such a long piece and a lot of weight at that end and very little over here. It takes a very strong grip to keep this up tight against the miter and avoid that from slipping. But it followed the line perfectly, so I'm happy. We made that okay. All right, I'm going to set the fence back up here and continue on with making our tenons on these pieces. All right, I have this set up the way that I want to make our long cuts. So I'm going to put you on fast forward while I cut all these, make all these cuts on the tenon, flip it over 90 degrees, drop the blade, and make the second pass on all of the pieces. So we'll do all of that through time lapse and come back when we're done. We are now ready for a dry fit of the entire piece. Let's just put it together and see what we get. Now on the, there's one more little twist to this piece. And that is on the top of these units, I'm probably going to have to put in a little recess. And I'll show you that in just a second. I'm just going to move this down to the floor so I can get that top part on. Okay. All right, I'm going to have to bring you around over here to show you what's going on. So here's a first look at a loose dry fit. Of course, what'll happen here is these ends are going to be cut off square and just to the inside edge of this leg and to the inside edge of this leg so that the piece will actually sit down just inside and be flush with the top of the leg. So a couple cuts to do that. On the shelf, we want this cross member to be the visible piece. And what that means then is I'm going to cut a recess, a relief on this cross member and the one opposite down 3/4 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch wide. So right at the seam here, that'll be recessed. So that's where we are. I think the next step here is going to be cutting this to appropriate width and length. A lot of sanding. And then we'll cut the relief on that shelf. And that'll just be on the front and back. We won't be doing any relief on the sides. Just doing a little bit of rearrangement of the pieces, making sure that I have the right piece for the right spot. So I swapped out the other piece that I had. That'll be the bottom shelf. This is going to be the top. And getting ready to cut this, I'm going to make some, this is going to be a really interesting top. It's just going to sit inside the four legs with no apparent means of support. This is going to be truly a floating top. Really interesting piece. So you'll see how I'm going to be connecting that in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to cut it to the exact dimension that we need, which is 50 inches in length and 14 inches in width. I'm going to break out the circular saw to cut the table to length, the tabletop to length. I'm going to set up a guide here. Fundamentally lets me operate this like a track saw, just to follow that guide there, perfectly straight edge. That'll give the perfectly straight line cut across the very end here. This is the type of thing where I set it up, checked it, double checked it, triple checked it, because we're now at a point where I can't make any mistakes. I have a little bit of leeway here, but I want this cut to be perfect so that when I cut the far side there, I can't make a mistake. All right, first cut down. I'm going to give this a little bit of a sand just to get rid of the burrs and the splinters that are kicked up. Of course, the whole top is going to be sanded significantly, but I just want to make sure that for handling I don't introduce any tear out. And I am going to cut this piece 1/16 of an inch longer than it needs to be, just to give me a little bit more opportunity to sand this really fine on each end. Okay, let me flip it around and measure, and we'll get this the far side cut. For the width, I will rip it through the table saw, but I'll probably take a little bit off each side, again, just to kind of provide some evenness to the piece. Probably be about 1/4 of an inch on each side. Okay, next we're going to cut this to width. All right, we're about to make a 2-pass cut. So I'm going to take a little bit off this side, just to kind of give us a nice straight edge. Then we'll turn it around, and we'll take the remaining off this side. And for those watching closely, yes, I did take a little bit more off this side than I did the other. Reason, I wanted to eliminate a blemish. So we had a little nail perforation there, came through that side, but by taking that little bit extra off this side, eliminated that blemish entirely. So there is our top, cut to size, subject to a little bit of sanding on the ends. And of course, sanding all over the top and the bottom. Anyway, I think it's time now to pause there, get a bite of lunch, come back, and we'll deal with this after that. So I'm taking the table apart again, ready to cut the notching out on these rails, support rails. So you can see I've kind of labeled them, in this case, lower outside front. This is the top of that lower outside front piece. And then I marked here, this is the 3/4 by 3/4 inch piece that I want to remove, into which that shelf is going to sit. So I'm just going to set up the saw to make these two cuts. It'll be a two-pass cut, one's to cut in and one's to cut on the top. Yeah, I'll just set up to do that and take this out. So to cut these out, this being the section that I want to remove, first pass will be like so up against the fence, flip it over, and make a second pass up against the fence. So two-pass operation for each of these. I'll probably fast forward through it, but at least you'll know what the cuts are being made. Okay, we can put that back together again. And now we'll be able to measure and get the shelves to fit exactly. So the shelf is going to sit into a space that's 12.5 by 50. So I'm going to take about an inch off each side of the shelf here and slip it in. So I'm set up to do the first side. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. It's got the same dimensions, so we'll make these cuts one right after the other. I'm going to use my circular saw now to cut this to length. And that, my friends, is a perfect fit. Really, really happy with that. Once these pieces are sanded down, that's going to look spectacular. So drawers are going to sit on top of this. We have 3 drawers in here. And they're going to be interesting because all the drawer hardware is going to be hidden, so you won't see anything. It's a very interesting piece. Okay, let me cut the bottom shelf to length, and we'll slip that in. Here's a first look at a complete dry fit. So you can see that this shelf, or the top here, will have no apparent means of support. It is literally just floating in free air there. A really interesting look. So a little bit of touching up of some of the wood, obviously lots of sanding to happen, and drawers to be made. But I think I'll move on now to doing some sanding so that we can actually get this piece fully assembled. I like the look of that. So I'm starting the sanding process by using the belt sander just to kind of get rid of some of the unevenness between the panels that occurred during the glue up. So that'll get everything kind of relatively level. And then we'll work down on the sandpaper grits, getting probably down to 180. So I've gone over the entire piece, the top of the piece, with the belt sander at 80 grit. Now we're moving up to 120 grit on the palm sander, or the orbital sander. So that finished off this surface with the 120. Now going up to 180. Sand that all down, see how it looks, and that might get it to the point ready for stain. Still a lot of sanding to do though. Whew. So, got the back side or the underside of the top here on the table. We've got it up to 120 and I just started on the 180. Ran out of battery power on a couple batteries here, so they're being charged up. I may have actually overheated my sander too, for that matter. But so I'm going to call that a video for today. So you saw rough assembly. Pleased with the overall look. I'll continue with the sanding tomorrow. That's primarily what we're going to do, is just sand, sand, sand. And then eventually get onto the drawers. May have to run an errand or go out looking for some drawer slides. I'm looking for some particular slides for this one, some undermounts. But that's it. Yeah, like I say, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. See you on the next video.